Okay, hey Rams. Tonight's homework is about equations and inequalities, but now it's about multiplication and division. In class, we learned about adding and subtracting, but now we are multiplying and dividing, okay? And tomorrow we'll move on. So the very first rule, the most important rule here to know, is that when multiplying or dividing a negative, you must flip the inequality. You must flip the inequality. And I'll show you what that means in just a second, okay? But first, before we begin, let's talk about what it looks like. How do I know if my problem is a multiplication problem or division? Well, the multiplication problems would have a number and a letter smushed up against each other here or up against the parentheses, okay? The division problems, this says C divided by 4. All right, and we'll refer back to that as we're going through our video here. Okay, our first problem says 5 times D equals 35. 5 times a number is 35. And yes, we know 5 times 7 is 35. But it's important here to understand the process of how to do that, so when we get to harder numbers, it makes sense. Okay, so this is multiplication. This says 5 times D. So the opposite of multiplying D by 5 is dividing by 5. So this is how you divide by 5. This is how you represent division. Okay, you draw the line and you put a 500. This is just a division problem. A fraction is just a division problem. Okay, now 5 divided by 5 is 1, so I'm left with just 1D, or D equals, and then 35 divided by 5 is 7. Okay, this is my answer, but now let's substitute it to check. Okay, so what I do is I take my 7 and I substitute it back in for D. 5 times 7 is 35. I write the problem just like it is, but with a 7 in there. 5 times 7 is 35. Does 35 equal 35? Yep. Okay, so my answer is D equals 7. So I put a closed circle on 7, and that's it. Okay, not too bad. The next one, oh, this one's a little tougher. Okay, this is where we talk about dividing by a negative here, and we have decimals in it also. Sorry. Okay, this says negative 2/10 times y is less than 1 8/10. Okay, so y is multiplied by negative 0.2. So to isolate the variable, the opposite of multiplying by negative 0.2 is to divide by negative 0.2. Okay, well, negative 0.2 divided by negative 0.2 is 1. So it just leaves me with just the y here. Okay, now, this one's a little bit tougher, so I have to go over here and do the actual work here, okay? Right. Well, I'm going to run out of room, but, okay, 1.8 divided by 0.2. Well, remember, I cannot have a decimal in my divisor here, so I have to move it over, make it a whole number. I move that one place, so I have to move this one place. So what I end up with is 18 divided by 2 is 9. But I have a positive divided by a negative. So when my signs are opposite, it means I have an answer that's negative. So my answer will have a negative here, and it'll be negative 9. Okay, but up to this rule here, when you multiply or divide by a negative, you flip your inequality. So this sign that says less than, when I divide it by negative 0.2, becomes greater than. That means my answer is greater than negative 9. Y can be any number greater than negative 9, but not negative 9, because there's not an equals to on there, okay? So there is my greater than negative 9. Okay, now we can check it. Let's pick a number and put it in there. Okay, do you want to say 5? Okay, is negative 5 greater than negative 9? Yes, it's to the right. So we're going to put negative 5 in there. I'm going to check it right here. Negative 0.2 times negative 5, is that less than 1.8? So what I want to know here, let me divide that. Okay, so 0.2 times 5 is 10, but I have one decimal place, so I have 1, so it's a 1. Negative times a negative is positive, so is 1 less than 1.8? Yes, so negative 5 is a solution for this answer. Okay? So always just pick a number that's in that range and substitute it back in. Okay, right down here. Now, these are division problems. This says a number divided by 3 is greater than or equal to 27. Okay, so this says we have divided by 3. So what is the opposite of dividing by 3? Multiplying by 3. Now, how do I show multiplying by 3 on here? Well, it looks like this. We just push a 3 up against that R and push a 3 up against that 27. So the opposite of dividing by 3 is to multiply by 3. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Well, look, I have a 3 here on top and a 3 on bottom. That's like having a fraction with 3 over 3, and that's 1. So I'm left with 1R, or just R. It's the same thing. Okay, and there's no negative here to flip around, so it's greater than or equal to. 27 times 3 is going to be 81. That means R can be anything that is equal to or greater than 81. So it's a closed circle, and 81 is a number that works because of that equal to sign, but it's a greater than. So we can pick anything at 81 or higher to substitute. So we're going to check it now. Let's pick 90 because I know 90 divides by 3, and it's greater than 81. So 90 divided by 3, is that greater than or equal to 27? Well, 90 divided by 3 is 30, and 30 is greater than or equal to 27. True. So 90 is the solution. Okay, that means that my arrow is going the correct direction here. Okay, one more here. All right, this says a number divided by -5/10 is less than 4. So I know we're adding a lot of steps in here, a lot of old things that we have to know, but that's okay. All right, so the opposite of dividing by a -0.5 is multiplying by a -0.5, right? If we divide it here, we have to do the opposite, which is multiplying. So it's -0.5 times -0.5. Okay, so these two are the same. One's on top, one's on bottom of my fraction. It's just extended across here. We cancel them, so we have x, okay? But when I divided by that negative, when I multiplied by this negative here, that means I've got to flip this. Instead of less than, it becomes greater than. Okay, now, what's 4 times 0.5? We'll put it right over here. 0.5 times 4 is 20, but 1 decimal place, so it's a 2. So 4 times -1/2, I have a 2 here, but it's a positive times a negative, which means my answer is negative, so it's -2. This says x is greater than -2. X is any number bigger than -2, but not -2, because it's not a greater than or equal to, so it's an open circle. Okay? Now let's substitute to check. Let's pick a number that's greater than -2. How about, let's say, 6. Okay? So 6 divided by -0.5 is less than 4. Okay, well, 6 divided by -0.5. Let's do that right here. 0.5, right? So move it over 1. Take that one and move it over 1. So 60. 5 times 12 is 60, right? But it's a positive divided by a negative, so my answer is negative. So -12 is less than 4. That is true. Okay, so it's an interesting way to substitute and check, and you end up with a number that's not even in the problem, and that's okay. But it's just checking to see if I pick a number like 6 that would be over here on this number line, does it still make this inequality true? And it does. Last one here, okay? Which number could not be a solution for x? Now, there are 2 ways to go about this. You could substitute numbers back in. You could say, well, -8 times -7, is that greater than or equal to 40? Is -5 times -8 greater than or equal to 40, right? You can do that. Or we could just go through and divide. Divide by -8. Divide by -8. Okay, now, I'm left with x. But because I divided by a negative, remember that rule, I have to flip this around. So instead of greater than or equal to, it becomes less than or equal to. Now, positive 40 divided by -8 is going to be -5. So x has to be less than or equal to -5. Okay, so which number on there is not less than or equal to -5? -3, because it is to the right of -5 on a number line. It is the only one that's not less than or equal to. Okay, write down what questions you have, and we're going to practice them some more in class.